In honor of Guardians 3 coming out this week, I wanted to take a deeper look at one of Marvel's least appreciated villains, Nebula, a character who's gone through one of the franchise's biggest arcs, but yet nobody seems to talk about her. Why the flip is that? Is it because her story isn't written that well, hidden under the background of other Guardians stories, or is it something completely different? Welcome back to Villain Review, and today I will be analyzing Nebula from the MCU, giving her a score 1 out of 10 at the end of the video. If you like the video, subscribe. I make a new villain analysis every single Monday. I got some good ones coming up, and you're not going to want to miss them.
Every time my sister prevailed, my father would replace a piece of me with machinery.
Nebula is one of the two main daughters of Thanos in the MCU, alongside her much greener and morally straight sibling Gamora. It's confirmed she's only an adoptive daughter of the Mad Titan, so we can assume, much like Gamora, she was taken in by Thanos after he killed her people on his quest to conquer the universe 50% off. We only get a few bits of information for Nebula's time with Thanos, but it all points to her having a pretty bad experience. Thanos would often put his two daughters against each other in training, and Gamora would always come out on top, prompting Thanos to replace a piece of Nebula with machinery every time she failed. Gamora gets more dubs than Tom Brady though, so Nebula would start to become more and more machine until she finally became just straight up cyborg. In the abusive family of Thanos, the two daughters would respond to their dad in two different ways. Gamora would catch on early and start to form a plan to escape her dad, while Nebula would lean into her role as his daughter, seemingly only caring about his approval, and it seems to be like that for most of Guardians 1. You might say, oh, why are you reviewing Nebula in the first place? She's not even a villain. Okay, well, like, yeah, now she's not, but in the first two films, she's a villain, okay? So I'm gonna justify it, okay? It's my video. Also, Guardians comes out this week, and I wanted to capitalize because views are kind of low, and I'd rather talk about her than Ronan because, let's be honest, Ronan's kind of boring. So what's Nebula's motivation? What's the main thing she wants in this franchise? My analysis of it, strap in, because it's pretty intense, pretty complicated. Love. She wants love. In Guardians 1, I think she serves her role as lapdog because she's convinced herself Thanos' love is the one thing that matters. The dude clearly doesn't love her like a good father should, but when you have nothing else in the world, you'll start to look for fulfillment in the darkest of places. I also think it could be a form of Stockholm Syndrome. Don't get me wrong, I think deep down Nebula hates Thanos as much as Gamora does, but it's kind of like that thing where people say, oh, if you smile more, you'll start to be happier. I think Nebula tells herself if she tries to love Thanos like a dad, one day she might for real, and they'll have that campy, authentic relationship all kids want with their parents. She later realizes though that she's not getting that love. It's gone, like my hopes of Jensen getting the credit he finally deserves. She then pivots in Guardians 2 and admits that all she wanted from Gamora was a sister. She wanted somebody to love, like the Queen song. In the end, she does gain a sister and an even bigger family in the entire Guardians, and I think that adds to the themes of found family this trilogy hammers home so strongly. Sometimes the families you find yourself in are toxic and hostile environments, but if you fight for it, you can find something that matters, a family that accepts you for who you are in all your blue cyborgness.
Thanos spent a long time trying to perfect me. And when he worked, he talked about his great plan.
I'll admit, I wasn't that big of a fan of Nebula when I first saw her in Guardians 1. She came across as just a side villain for Ronan that the Guardians could fight, you know, when he was off doing some other naughty thing. Rewatching the films, I kind of still feel that way, but her role in the movie makes a lot more sense given the knowledge of where she's going forward. As a villain, I wouldn't say she's very intimidating either, since we know she's lost to Gamora dozens and dozens of times, but it's her personality and role within the group that starts to shine through as the movies continue on. Guardians 2 does a lot to show her true feelings towards Gamora and Papa Thanos, and we see that hatred for her dad on full display throughout both Infinity War and Endgame. I really like the fact that we get to see young Nebula again in Endgame, and all those interactions between Thanos' servant Nebula and I can see clearly now Nebula are pretty interesting. We get a first-hand look at how much Nebula has changed over the film, what she values, and what she's convinced herself of. It is a huge shift in character, but it's done pretty smoothly. The Guardians are a rowdy bunch though, so obviously Nebula's gonna have to bring in some laughs as well, and she does that in a very similar way to Drax, but it's a little different. Nebula is funny because she's not funny at all. It's her bluntness that leads to some very unintentionally funny moments. Karen Gillan also does a really good job in the role. Honestly, I can barely tell it's her. She plays that manipulative, evil, and at times sympathetic side really well, and she brings a lot to the role.
You are a disappointment, sister. Out of all our siblings, I hated you least.
Like I said, Nebula isn't all that interesting to me in Guardians 1, but in Guardians 2, there's a lot more depth and complexity to her scenes that I really like. My favorite of which being the one where she finally beats Gamora in a fight after trying to, you know, ram a spaceship into her. I know that sounds bad, but sibling love is complicated. It's one of the most important Nebula scenes as her whole motivation starts to become clear. She was jealous of Gamora, but deep down loved her and wanted a relationship with her. The acting by both in this scene is really good, and it's important to get our best look at what has really been driving Nebula throughout these movies. We also get some good ones in Infinity War, this being the movie where her and Gamora actually feel like sisters. When Thanos is torturing her, we see just how much Gamora really cares about her, and the end is really interesting because her reaction to finding out Gamora is dead is similar but very different to Quill's. Both are incredibly sad, maybe even equally so, but Nebula doesn't express emotion in the same way Peter does. As she puts the pieces together of what happened on Vormir, you can see on her face she's really hurt by it, and then in her reaction to Quill's outburst, it's just really interesting to have these two react in such different ways. He's yelling and getting upset, very emotional, and she's just quiet. You can see in her face she's still sad, but she's quiet, and I don't want to say calm, but she's a lot more contained. It's a good representation of grief and how it always doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing. Sometimes it's quiet, and that's okay. A small touch in this movie I really like. In Endgame, we get that sweet back and forth between past and present Nebula I already talked about, and it's just good to see her come full circle into being on the good guys team. She has some good and interesting interactions with Thanos and plenty of other characters, and I'm glad to see her having such a big role in the films. Like, when you think about it, she has a bigger role than most of the MCU in these final two Avengers films. It's pretty good stuff.
Well.
You should have killed me.
Would have been a waste of parts.
So how come people don't talk about Nebula? Maybe it's because her story is always kind of in the background. She's always a B story. She's never the main villain in anything, and while she gets a lot of depth and complexity, it's never at the forefront of the films she's in. When people watch Infinity War and Endgame, they want to talk about the snap, they want to talk about the cool thing Iron Man did. They don't want to stop and be like, oh, Nebula has a really good arc in this thing. She is a side character though, so I get it. There just always seems to be some bigger thing to talk about and take people's attention away. It was like that when she was a villain, and now that she's a hero, nothing has changed, but maybe they will in Guardians 3, okay? I haven't seen it yet. As far as B stories go though, I think Nebula's story of finding love, redemption, and forging the person who she wants to be is one of Marvel's best. I can't say she's one of the universe's best villains though, because she's never really a main villain, but she's definitely one of the most complex and interesting side characters the MCU has ever produced. Most big franchises don't have side characters with this level of quality when it comes to writing, character arcs, and relationships with the story itself and some of the main characters. With all of that in mind, I'm gonna give Nebula a 7.
Do not tell me what I want.
I don't need to tell you what you want, it's obvious.
You were the one who wanted to win, and I just wanted a sister.
Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of Nebula in the comments below and who I should review next.
It's not ripe.